Hello friends, I'm happy to have you back.
Let me share a bizarre story about my neighbor, a tale that began with an early morning phone call that still leaves me shaking my head. It was a quiet Saturday, and I was enjoying the deepest part of my sleep when my phone rang loudly. Groggy and confused, I glanced at the clock. It was just after 5 a.m.
My favorite time to sleep in.
Fearing some emergency, I quickly answered. To my surprise, it was Karren, my neighbor, someone I'd only exchanged polite hellos with over the fence. She didn't even bother with a greeting. Without hesitation, she launched into a request that left me stunned.
She wanted access to my garage.
Yes, my private garage. Apparently, her son was visiting and his oversized SUV didn't fit in their garage. So naturally, she assumed she could just use mine. But it wasn't just the garage. She wanted keys to all secure areas of my property. Garage, backyard gate, everything. For security, she said, to protect her son's car. I could barely process what I was hearing. She was rambling about her son's new job, his road trip plans, how proud she was of him. I understood the excitement, but none of it explained why she felt entitled to my property. When I gently declined, she seemed annoyed. But our garage is too small, she argued. You can use ours instead. Just let me know when you need access. Of course, she only had one house key, so this meant I'd have to work around her schedule if I needed my own car. Her reasoning was absurd. She expected me to compromise my security, privacy, and daily routine for her convenience. I was still half asleep, but the arrogance of the request jolted me awake. Needless to say, I refused.
Still, the call left me restless.
I sat with a cup of coffee, replaying the conversation, wondering if I had just dreamed it. But it was real. The entitlement I just experienced wasn't something I could ignore. To give you a bit of background, this is a quiet suburban neighborhood. I moved here about 4 years ago. It's peaceful, with well-kept homes spaced just far enough apart for privacy. I have good relationships with most neighbors. Rory and Faith, the older couple across the street, are wonderful. I help them with small tasks, and they thank me with fresh fruit baskets. Next door on the right lives a family with teenagers. Their summer pool parties can be noisy, but they're respectful and always invite the whole block. It's a friendly place. Karren, on the other hand, lives to my left. She's different. Known for her demanding nature, she'll message late at night complaining about porch lights, but will ignore complaints about her dog howling for hours. She brags about her house, which is nearly identical to the others on the street. We've never really connected, just the occasional awkward wave at the mailbox. From what I've heard, she's had disputes with other neighbors too. Fence lines, noise, boundaries. But this was the first time she directly demanded something from me, and it was outrageous. After fully waking up, I realized I needed to stay alert. That kind of entitlement doesn't just go away. I remembered I had a small security camera near the garage. I'd installed it mostly for peace of mind. Now, it seemed absolutely necessary. Later, I took a walk around the neighborhood to shake off the tension. The sky was bright, the breeze was perfect, joggers were out, families were already at the park, kids tossing crumbs to ducks, a woman setting up an easel to paint. The serene scene helped clear my mind. Returning home, I saw Karren in her front yard. She looked up, gave a half-hearted wave, and went back to her flower pots. I considered walking over to clear the air, but I remembered her cold tone from the call.
Ich chose piso vert, confrontation, and walked past.
Around lunchtime, as I was tending my herb garden on the back porch, my phone buzzed. A message from Karren. I'm serious about the arrangement we discussed this morning.
My son arrive tomorrow. Please bring your spare keys.
I was floored. Not only was she repeating her bizarre request, she was now expecting compliance.
My frustration bubbled over.
I replied with a short, polite message. I'm not comfortable sharing my keys. My property is private. Please respect that. I sent it and placed the phone face down. The next morning, there was a knock at my door, not early this time. It was around 9 a.m. I opened it to see Karren, and beside her a tall, broad-shouldered young man, her son. He looked polite but clearly uncomfortable. Karren's tight smile said everything. She wasn't done. When I answered the door, Karren was there with her son Lucas. Maybe she sensed the tension or felt the awkwardness. She smiled sweetly, pretending everything was normal. Hello neighbor, she said in a sing-song voice. I wanted to introduce my son, Lucas. Since he'll be around, I figured you two would cross paths. We're a friendly neighborhood, after all. Her forced cheer made me cringe, but I nodded politely to Lucas.
Nice to meet you.
Congrats on the new job, I said. He looked surprised I knew, then smiled and said thanks. Karren jumped back in. We just wanted to resolve that little situation. Our garage is way too tight for Lucas's SUV. It's super inconvenient. But you're a helpful neighbor, right? I kept my voice calm, though I was getting tired of repeating myself. I'm not comfortable with that.
I value my privacy and security.
Your son is welcome to use the street for short-term parking, or you could reorganize your garage. Karren's smile twitched. Clearly, she was used to getting her way with charm and pressure. Lucas, looking a bit sheepish, said he could manage parking on the street. But Karren wasn't satisfied. That's not very neighborly, she snapped before tugging Lucas away. As they walked off, I heard her muttering that I was selfish. Lucas gave me an apologetic wave over his shoulder. Something told me Karren wasn't done. That afternoon, she messaged me again. It was a long emotional explanation about how difficult it was for Lucas to park, how they were worried about theft, and how he wouldn't be around long. She even offered bags of mulch and stones from some landscaping project, as if that made up for violating my security. I replied simply, I'm sorry, but my answer remains the same, no. Soon after, I learned Karren had begun telling neighbors that I was being cold and unhelpful. I hadn't realized how far she'd go until Rory and Faith from across the street brought it up. Are you in a disagreement with Karren? Faith asked gently. She's mentioned you a few times lately. Apparently, Karren was painting a picture of herself and Lucas as victims, suggesting I heartlessly refused to help them park. Rory shook his head. I told her, your property is your property. You don't have to share your garage. But she acts like you're being spiteful over something small. I appreciated their support. Her request was intrusive, I told them. We wouldn't give her our keys either, Faith said firmly. Their understanding gave me some peace of mind. In the days that followed, Karren and Lucas finally cleared out enough boxes from their garage and managed to squeeze the SUV in. I thought that might be the end of it. But no, Karren found new ways to stir things up. One morning, I stepped outside to water my plants and found a note taped to my fence. Your hedge is growing onto my property. I had measured that hedge. It was well within my boundary. That same day, she bombarded me with messages accusing my porch light of keeping her awake. A strange claim, considering the bulb is a tiny downward-facing LED that barely lights more than a couple of feet. She didn't stop there. Notes about trash placement, neighborhood rules, and other nonsense began appearing in my mailbox. Petty, constant pestering. I half expected her to complain that my house color wasn't regulation gray or that my grass grew too evenly. I tried to ignore her. I believed that if I didn't engage, she'd eventually move on. But she was relentless. One afternoon, I returned from errands to find her leaning on my garage door. Startled, I stepped out of the car wary.
Looking for something?
I asked. She folded her arms. A package. The delivery service said it was left on a front porch, but I didn't see it. I thought maybe it ended up here. I scanned the porch. Nothing here. If I find it, I'll let you know. But Karren didn't stop. Could it be in your garage? She asked, eyes narrowed. Maybe the driver left it inside. That suggestion was ridiculous. Why would a delivery driver open my locked garage? You never know, she shrugged. Maybe they were confused. I was losing patience.
Karren, no one delivered anything into my garage.
It's locked. Please don't assume otherwise. She huffed. You're just so unhelpful, she muttered, walking off. I stood there stunned. Did she really just invite herself onto my property and demand access again, this time over a package? Thankfully, I had security footage. I double-checked it later just in case she had done something while I was gone. Around this time, our neighborhood HOA meeting took place. I usually skipped these boring sessions, but something told me Karren would bring me up, so I attended. It was held at the local community center, and about 30 neighbors showed up. The usual topics came up: yard care, seasonal decorations, parking reminders. Then came the complaints section. Karren stood immediately. Without using my name, She described a situation involving hedges blocking sidewalks and porch lights that disturbed neighbors at night. Everyone knew who she meant. The board listened politely and said they'd look into it if needed. At the neighborhood association meeting, Karren stood up to share vague complaints. She glanced in my direction when the committee asked her to clarify whom she was talking about, but she didn't say my name. "We all just want a peaceful community," she said with a sugary tone, "so I hope we can resolve these matters quickly."
The Ironistung.
This coming from the woman who tried to commandeer my garage? Still, I stayed silent. She hadn't directly accused me, and I didn't want to appear defensive without cause. After she finished, someone else brought up cars parked too close to fire hydrants, and the meeting continued. I considered mentioning Karren's harassment but decided to wait. I wanted more concrete proof first. Later that same evening, as I was taking out the trash, Lucas, Karren's son, pulled into their driveway. After some maneuvering, he managed to get the SUV parked, barely. He gave me a sheepish wave, and I walked over to greet him. We chatted for a moment. He seemed polite and clearly caught in the middle. When I asked if the garage was working out, he shrugged, glancing toward Karren's window. "She just worries a lot," he said. "I don't mind parking on the street or squeezing into our garage, but she thinks your spot is better." He paused, then added, "Sorry for the trouble." I assured him I didn't hold him responsible. It was obvious Karren had pushed the issue from the start, but Karren wasn't letting go that easily. The next day, there was a knock at my door. A city inspector stood there, looking mildly uncomfortable. "I'm here to check out a complaint regarding unsafe overgrowth and sidewalk obstructions," he said. I gestured toward my meticulously trimmed hedges and spotless walkway. After a quick glance, he nodded. "Everything looks perfect," he admitted. "Honestly, this seems like a false report, but I'm required to document it." He didn't mention the name behind the complaint, but I didn't need him to. I knew that was the last straw. That evening, I visited my friend Joy, who practices law. She's not a property lawyer, but she's well versed in homeowners' rights. Over coffee, I laid everything out: Karren's early morning call, the absurd request for my keys, the passive-aggressive notes, the HMA drama, and now the city complaint. Joy raised her eyebrows.
"Asking for your garage keys?"
"That's outrageous," she said. Her advice was clear: keep records, dates, times, texts, notes and witnesses. If Karren entered my property again or kept filing baseless complaints, remind her of trespassing laws. If it escalated, send a formal cease and desist letter or pursue a restraining order. I went home and got organized. I created a folder for Karren's texts, photographed the notes she left, saved camera footage from the driveway, and prepared myself mentally for whatever came next. Just a few days later, Karren returned, this time red-faced and fuming. "There are paint chips blowing onto my property from yours," she accused. "I do repaint old furniture occasionally in a small contained outdoor spot, but I always clean up thoroughly." There was no way flakes were floating into her yard. "You need to clean my lawn and pay for the mess," she demanded. I calmly replied, "Karren, if you continue filing baseless complaints, I'll be forced to take legal steps. I've already consulted my attorney." Her eyes narrowed. "You'll regret this," she snapped, spinning around and storming off. Her parting words gave me chills, not because I feared her, but because her behavior was becoming unpredictable. Meanwhile, the neighborhood association was organizing our annual block party. It's usually a cheerful event, a potluck, a grill station, music for the kids, and lots of neighborly chatting. I signed up to help, thinking maybe it would ease tensions. Karren volunteered too, for decorations. On the morning of the party, I helped set up grills and tables, while Karren busied herself arranging tablecloths and fussing over floral centerpieces. I stayed focused on my tasks, hoping to avoid conflict. But of course, she approached. "Could you move the grills a few feet back?" she asked stiffly. "We don't want grease near the decorations." Her tone was clipped, but the request was fair. I nodded silently and adjusted the setup. I half expected her to complain about something else, parking spots, maybe, but she didn't. As the event kicked off, the neighborhood came alive with energy. Kids ran around laughing, music played, and everyone brought a delicious dish to share. It felt, for a brief moment, like everything was okay. Karren floated from table to table, all smiles and compliments. If you didn't know the history, you'd think she was the friendliest person on the block. But by mid-afternoon, I overheard her cornering another neighbor, Toby. She was arguing that his backyard shed violated her property line. He looked overwhelmed and confused, nodding quietly as she talked. Clearly, I wasn't the only one she'd targeted. I suddenly realized I wasn't alone. Karren wasn't just difficult with me. She had a pattern. One by one, the neighbors were seeing it too. Her manipulation, her entitlement, it was all being exposed. That night, as the party wound down and neighbors carried home leftover desserts and half-empty lemonade bottles, I felt something I hadn't felt in a while, relief. Because I knew, whatever Karren tried next, she was no longer just my problem. As the block party wound down and people began clearing their things, I was walking a trash bag over to one of the large event bins when Karren returned, Lucas trailing behind her with a plate of leftovers. Karren let out a theatrical sigh. "Wasn't that a wonderful event?" she said, trying to sound friendly. I gave a cautious nod. "Since we're all in good spirits," she continued, "maybe we can revisit our earlier conversation? Lucas is here for just a few more days, and it would mean so much if you'd reconsider letting us use your garage." Lucas looked visibly uncomfortable. "Mom, it's really not that important," he began, but she cut him off. I took a breath. "Karren," I said firmly, "as I've already told you, I'm not giving you access to my garage."
Dix parties change nothing.
The answer is still no. Her smile snapped into a scowl. "You are so selfish," she snapped, turning heads nearby. "After everything I've done for this neighborhood." With that, she spun on her heel and stormed off. Lucas gave me an apologetic glance and followed her. But that wasn't the end. Karren wasn't just going to give up.
Soon after, strange things started happening.
My timed sprinklers began going off at random, sometimes soaking my porch. I initially assumed it was a technical glitch, until it happened again. Something felt off. I reviewed my security camera footage. In the early morning hours, someone was creeping into my yard, tampering with the sprinkler controls. The figure wore a hoodie, but the body type and walk were unmistakable. It was Karren.
Il savait de faux otages.
The next day, I confronted her calmly. "Karren, I'd really prefer not to escalate things, but I have footage of someone adjusting my sprinkler system. Please stop." She folded her arms. "I have no idea what you're talking about," she said flatly. "You think I'm sneaking around your yard to mess with your irrigation? I have better things to do."
Prédictable de Niall.
But I warned her that if anything else happened, I'd involve the authorities. A few days passed quietly. Lucas left. His SUV disappeared. I hoped that would be the end of it, but then came a new twist. I received an anonymous typed letter, clearly written by Karren, posing as some kind of neighborhood betterment committee. It accused me of being uncooperative, and summoned me to a mandatory meeting about being a more supportive community member. It even listed a date and time, but there was no HOA involvement. This was a clear attempt to intimidate me. That was the final straw. I gathered everything: the security footage, her text messages, copies of the false city complaint, the fake committee letter, and I went straight to the police. The officer reviewed the material and said that while this was still in civil territory, it bordered on harassment. If she kept it up, I could seek a restraining order. Instead of jumping to court, I took my lawyer friend Joy's advice. We sent a formal cease and desist letter by certified mail. It detailed every issue: her demands, the trespassing, the nuisance complaints, and false reports. It clearly stated that if the behavior didn't stop, I would pursue legal remedies. Days passed. Delivery was confirmed.
Then, silence. No nasty note.
No surprise city visits.
No early morning nonsense.
A week later, there was a knock at my door. It was Karren, but this time, she looked nervous, not angry. "I got your letter," she said quietly. "I don't like being threatened with legal stuff." "It wasn't a threat," I replied calmly. "It was a boundary. You crossed it." She looked away. "I didn't mean to cause real harm. I thought you were just being difficult," and things spiraled. She paused, then added, "I won't bother you anymore. Let's just stay out of each other's way." Not exactly an apology, but I could live with that. "Fair enough," I said. "Respect my boundaries, and I'll respect yours." From then on, things actually improved. Karren stopped harassing me. She stopped complaining to the city. At HMA meetings, she focused on bigger picture stuff, like suggesting new speed bumps or ranting about the crowded public library, not personal vendettas. Then I heard from Toby. The neighbor Karren had harassed over his fence. He told me the HMA had finally stepped in. After hearing from multiple neighbors, they warned Karren officially, no more baseless complaints or she'd face fines and lose her clubhouse privileges. Apparently, she was furious, but she listened, and that was enough for me. Karren never said she was sorry, but I didn't need her to. I got what mattered: peace, privacy, and the return of normal life. Lucas, as far as I know, never found out what his mother had been up to. He came back briefly weeks later, parked his SUV in their newly cleaned garage or out front. His business, not mine. When I saw him, he was polite as ever. One final note: the original city inspector, the one Karren had sent, stopped by again, this time casually, just to check on things. He confirmed everything was fine and apologized for the earlier visit. "I'm sorry you had to deal with all that," he said before walking off. "Since then, I've kept my cameras on and my records up to date, just in case. But things have stayed quiet, peaceful, even. I can water my herb garden without side eyes. I can check my mailbox without weird notes. And best of all, Karren doesn't have my keys." Maybe she's finally learned. Some neighbors won't cave, no matter how loud you knock.